just going to briefly introduce. We have Seating Yang here, who made Blue Reverie, the middle film, and she's an illustrator as well as a filmmaker. I'm only going to briefly do these. You've got these notes inside your program, so I hope you'll read up on all their various careers. We have Lizzie Olesker in the center. She, with Lynn Sachs, made the Washing Society. And she's also a playwright and theatre director, as well as performer, I think, yeah. And then we have David Brody, who made Proliferation, the first film that you saw, and he's also an illustrator as well as filmmaker, and he writes about the arts. And there's a whole lot more here, and you can read that later. And a painter, I'm so sorry. Very talented people here. So I actually would like to start off some questions. I found this interesting. Often with an experimental program, you'll find there will be some films where you've got very personal films and people have made them all on their own. All of these films have got a high level of collaboration, and I wouldn't mind asking each of the filmmakers a little bit about the degree to which they collaborated and how that affected the film. So perhaps if I start with you, Seating, your film is perhaps more of an auteur type film. You directed. It's obvious that you had a very big amount of control on it, but you've obviously got a lot of people you're collaborating with them. I don't know whether they were people that you knew or just professional crew and actors, but how much were you totally directing your vision, and how much did other people work with you and did that shape it a little bit?
So I knew my DP 3 years ago, and we made a film together, and it was also a piece of more experimental. So actually what's in the film, the ice skating part, I shot that 3 years ago, and he shot that. So I think because after that we became friends, so I felt really comfortable talking about my ideas with him. So we work really close together, but he's a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And also I have Crystal. She's also my friend from school, and she, I think she did more than 80 to do. She was a PA jobs, because I didn't really have a lot more people helping me on set, but they did really contribute a lot. And I have like my friend Eliza we met at Parsons, and she really helped me talking about ideas throughout.
Oh, thank you. And Lizzie,
Sure.
Can I just, you've got a collaboration with Lynn. You seem to have a lot of collaboration with the laundry workers, and also with performers and a composer. So there's a lot of collaboration.
Yeah, I would say there's collaboration at every turn of this film. So I made the film with Lynn Sachs, and so we co-directed it and created it together. But it was also a collaboration with the subjects of our film. The documentary was about laundromat workers, so they were very much a part of the making of the film, along with the performers. So we can talk about that later, but at a certain point in the film, I think you understand that the performers, who they are and how they're portraying workers, and then the workers are portraying themselves. And then also we collaborated with our cinematographer, with our editor, and I feel like it was really very much a co-vision between all of us.
And did it change?
Oh, absolutely. I think each person's contribution changed what it was from when we started until the end. So I think, they were involved in it, part of the process, for sure.
Thank you. And David, you also worked with a composer, and I learned a little bit about this before the screening, but if you could help us with, I mean, obviously the sound and the visuals very, very close together. They just seem to be one vision, and how did that work with your composer?
The few films that I've made, mostly I'm a painter, but I've made 5 or 6 or 7 animations going back to the late 1980s. And all of the films I've made have been about the correspondence between sound and image. In some cases, I worked with pre-existing scores and made visuals to go with them. And in a couple of other cases, I've made films that had a certain amount of sort of inherent structure in them, and then given them to composers to score. But the composers who I've worked with sort of understand what I'm after, which is really a one-to-one kind of dialogue between music or sound score and image. And in this case, I've known the composer Zig Grond since the late 1980s when we were both at CalArts. And he's really an experimental video maker who also composes. And his day job for many years was as a film editor, I should say a music editor in Hollywood. So he would compose temporary soundtracks with moods for actual Hollywood films like The Matrix, the 3 Matrix films. He was the music editor on those films. You never heard his music, but he sort of established the moods for later for the composer. So he has a library of sounds and a real talent for that kind of thing. Plus he understands my interest in sort of real frame-to-frame correspondence. So we worked together before on film, and I gave this to him, and he got what I was after.
And you were telling me just before the screening that you actually had completed the visual part of the film before he started working.
In this case, yeah. But after he gave me a score, we talked about it, and he made some changes, and we have a really strong dialogue, so he totally got what I was doing. So it wasn't quite a one-off.
Oh, thank you. Another thing that I noticed that is common to all the films, you can keep that, I'll start from the other end, is all these films seem to really splice together different things. And with yours, David, I was thinking I can sense some sort of industrial, both the visual and the sound, there's an industrial kind of quality going in, and then there comes in a sort of a religious thing. So we've got these different worlds coming in and meshing and making something different. And then this apocalyptic thing at the end where there's a great swelling of the sound and a lot of activity with your object. Can you talk a little about that? What was going on?
I mean, my visual stimulus for making the film is purely abstract, but content sort of comes into it, and I might have pushed it a little bit. I didn't give Zig too many instructions about it, but he, like I said, he got my vision. Interestingly enough, you say there's a religious sound structure a little bit at the end. He made use of a Mozart Mass, Great Mass in C minor, I think it is. And I didn't mention that at all to him at first, but I'd already been experimenting with that third piece of music. And so at some point we were sort of stuck, and I said, you might listen to this piece of music. I've already been listening to this. So we actually were really on the same wavelength there. And then he has the imagination and the skill to turn that into something a little bit different, complicated and interesting. And so he brought his own content to it. But oddly enough, we are on the same wavelength.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
It was about the mesh. I mean, and
meshing.
You've got the past, the history of the laundry, the washerwoman from the past and the present going in, and
Yeah, I guess for me, I have to say that this was my first film that I ever made, whereas Lynn has made many films, my co-director. And so to me, the whole process is about juxtaposition, like sort of things coming up against other things. And I think that's true in terms of the content of the film also, but just in the making of it. So, you know, you sort of have all this stuff, and then it's sort of how are you going to put it together? And that was really exhilarating to me, that process where you sort of find things and then see what they do next to each other. But it's interesting that you talked about, I didn't talk about the sound and the music, because all of the sound was derived from sampled machine sounds and the sounds in the laundromat. Stephen Vitiello did the music. So that was another layer that came in kind of late, I guess. But I guess that just the process of creating it is like a layering or collaging or juxtaposing of things. And I guess the way sometimes things that are in opposition with one another was really interesting to us.
And Ting, you've got a lot of things collide. You've got this underwater world coming, all these fantasy elements that are coming in, but you've got a narrative going on that seems like a very personal story. And you've got these two different characters, like it seems, I understand from what you've written, that it's two sides of the one person, but there's so many things coming in and sort of layering in and creating a loose sense of what is going on. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, but what's the question?
Well, in terms
The
of
process of
well, how you brought in so many different layers to make this, it's like a narrative of what's going on for this young woman. Just as with the Washing Society, like for a while we're not really sure that some of the people are performers, and in yours also it's a little bit like we don't always know exactly what the relationship is with these two young women who are seem to be having a parallel life.
Yeah, so I think I was trying to portray what's really many layers, because there's a lot going on in the character's mind, in her mind. So the process of making it, or the pre-production, I often confuse myself too. So I was thinking, if I want to portray different sides of her, should I have 3 actresses or 2 actresses? That took me a long time to decide, because I was thinking maybe I could have one person to be the idea of this person and 2 other people to really portray the sides of one person. But I had to read out what's going on for them. I ended up having a 5 pages essay just for me to be clear what I'm creating. So it's difficult.
Yeah, and what made you because one of your people is Chinese and one is European based, I think, maybe not. Was that a very necessary part of who the 2 people were?
I was thinking about the choice of actress a lot too. Actually, Annabelle is my friend, and I knew her for 7 years. I think 7 years. It's not just because she's my friend, so I have my friend acting in it. I also did rounds of auditions, and I was thinking about maybe if it's one person, maybe I could have 2 Asians if I was in, because I wasn't sure that I should be in or not. But then I was thinking it's about 2 sides of oneself, so it doesn't matter what she is. So it's more like psychological, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And she speaks Chinese, so I feel
She really did. I'm impressed.
yeah, I just feel right, and
Yeah.
to have her, and we did rehearsal together. Actually, she did
I was helping out for the campaign.
Yeah, for my lines too. Yeah, I just feel really safe to have her
Yeah.
be acting in it.
Okay. And hoping I'm not doing too much of sharing things, but there was, I found in all of these pieces, another thing I noticed that common to all of them is some kind of really enjoyment of circularity and abstract. Like even though there were narratives in there, there was this playing with a kind of dance and abstracting things. So Lizzie, you have the microphone. I saw a lot of that in your film.
Yes, there is. I think there's a lot of circularity coming from just the movement of the laundromat itself, the clothes and the bodies that do the work. And in terms of the structure of the film, it's not a narrative arc exactly, but it kind of has a way of things appearing and then repeating and coming back, kind of reflecting what we're talking about in terms of the work itself and the endless cycle of it and the regeneration of it. So I think that's true. There's just
And in
circularity.
fact, your whole film had a lot of a sense of rhythm all the way through it. There was a kind of we're coming back, we're coming back, we're coming back, and this sort of ongoing thing.
It's so interesting though, I have to say, like watching the film with different audiences, because I did watch in just the way, I mean, all film is about time, but I think time is used in different ways, obviously, in every film, but in ours, there's a kind of a relentlessness and a deliberateness and a slowness, if you will, that takes a kind of patience, I suppose, but also that things do come back. And I think in that coming back, there's a kind of energy also in allowing the things to circle back.
We go to David. You, at the end, you know, your object kind of has this great flowering or whatever, I don't know how you would call it, but then it's got this great burst of activity. And I was curious, like you've got your 4 cycles through this thing, and each one retracts. And I was curious what that is, why there is this, is there any sort of narrative in there, or is it just it worked to try one thing and then to do a more complex one and then to do more and more? Or what's going on? It's a beautiful dance in that final sequence.
Thank you. Curiosity is part of it, to see what I can make the structure do, how far I can take it from simple germ to kind of efflorescence of dance. But I'm as an abstract painter and as an abstract filmmaker, I'm very pro narrative structure. So I would like abstract films to have a kind of a mystery, a suspense, climax, conclusion. And that, I consider that a kind of a challenge. I think music, I think the collaboration between sound and image is a huge part of that. And that's why I put all the emphasis on the composer here. But the piece really began as a series of 4 wall drawings, large drawings that I used to make. I don't make these anymore, but I used to make them as installations. And this was originated as a piece in an art space in Buffalo called Hall Walls. So I did the large wall drawings, and then I had time to make a virtual 3D sort of model of what the drawings were. 4 drawings and those 4 stages. And then I was seeing, well, the curiosity is what could I do as an animator to make this thing into a dramatic structure. And so the origins of the piece really go back almost 20 years. In an early version, everyone's still here, Evan Fisher curated an early version of this piece for a show in Philadelphia, and I've shown it in a few other places in various other forms. This is the final form, which is why I call it Pro Liberation 2018. One last comment is that when I've shown it as an installation, it's been on as a loop. So that's a very different kind of structure than a theatrical structure. But I'm actually more interested in theatrical structures. I think that's if you can pull that off, it's more interesting.
Thank you. And Suting, I'll ask, you also, you've got this, a lot of dance in your film and a lot of camera panning around and these circular things and your, I don't know quite where it is, where all the characters were sitting in these little cubbies. The cars are there.
Like in the pods.
At the beginning.
Like in the pod.
Yeah, little pods. I don't know what they're called. But there's this lovely sense, it's a carousel, okay. The lovely sense of being kind of immersed in a very circular environment that, you know, especially with the fish swimming, you get this feeling of going round and perhaps being a bit lost. Could you maybe talk to that?
So I remember I kept telling my DP that I want everything to be moving in the film, and actually because of that, we did 2 reshoots or more. Because first we were talking about making things moving, and we had this plans, but then the first shoot, I think we shot the arcade scene, and it just seemed very normal. It wasn't moving to me, so we had to do a reshoot. So I think that's kind of my personal choice, and also it's because in the characters, in the world, I think everything was moving, like the thoughts and everything she's been through.
Good, thank you. And I've asked enough repetitive questions, so I really hope you can have some, whatever questions you have, you want to ask the filmmakers something about their work. Do you need a microphone?
No, I think I can speak up a little bit.
Let's get you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we only have 2 mics. Did somebody pass?
Got it?
We can just pass it.
I'll move, wait, it's fine.
Okay, so I'll have this question addressed to Siting because I know that she's dedicated a lot of her time and energy to do the skating scene. And I've never seen the film in whole, so I wonder how, in retrospect, how skating has kind of enforced this film or how it kind of tied it together, because I think that's a very personal scene to you, and I'd like to find out more about what roles it plays in this film or this project as a whole.
I didn't recognize my friend first. So actually the skating scenes or the imagery of ice skating should be a big part of this, but I think so. What's in the film was shot 3 years ago, but I actually shot the skating again, but I wasn't really happy with the result, so I ended up just cutting down a lot of the skating scene, and the meaning of it. It represents the character's past memories, and I don't think it's gonna, like the ideas is not shown in the film, but it's kind of personal to me. So also to the character, it's that's more like the motivation of what she wants to make, like for her project, kind of the inspiration. So I don't think the idea is really shown in the film, but that part is really important. So I just kept them.
Thank you. Even if some of your ideas might not have been fully realized, there's relationships between all the different things that you did. That dancing and circular things still there. Anyway, does someone else have a question?
I do. My question is also for stitching. So the thing that really drew me in about this film was the sets. They're so, like, obviously the sets themselves are beautiful, but the way that they're shot also just makes them feel really like alive, I guess, even though many of them are practically empty except for a couple of characters. And basically, I guess my question is, how did you go about filming in these locations, like the arcade and the restaurant, where basically no one was there, and the carousel, I guess it was? I've never seen a carousel like that. It's so cool.
I spent a long time on the locations. I remember for the carousel, I think I communicated with the location for many months. And because before contacting them, I knew exactly that's the visual I wanted. So I spent a lot of time writing them emails. So I would have tutor help me. I wrote why the location are so important to my film and what the film meant to me personally. Because I think the location, the visuals, they're just very important to, visually is important, and also to the concept of the film. And arcade. For all the locations, I went there myself and talked to the owners and the oyster bar, and they're very cool. And I think most of them, I forgot what I was saying, but they gave me, for the aquarium, actually the the manager, I forgot her title, she let me shoot for free.
Oh.
And I remember when I was telling my teacher that I really need a real aquarium, I'm not gonna do post those digital stuff in my phone. And my teacher told me it's not possible, but I just had to make it. So I asked many aquariums, and I guess I'm lucky.
Anybody else? Yes.
I've got a question for Lizzie. Just out of curiosity, did you get a sense through this film, this is a very practical question, what percentage of New Yorkers wash their own laundry at laundromats, and what percentage of New Yorkers leave like wash and fold?
Drop.
Yeah.
I do not have an answer to that, like an actual, I don't have a statistic. But, you know, I think that the whole drop-off service, what we discovered was that in a lot of neighborhoods, as they are changing so rapidly, laundromats are disappearing, which we spoke to a little bit at the end. And those that remain in neighborhoods that are changing and gentrifying, often people said they had more drop-off now than ever, that people don't go in to do their laundry anymore. But I don't have a statistic, but that's an interesting question.